Okay, cool. Let's just get started. I think there'll be a few more people dropping in here and there, so I'll just keep an eye on that on the participant side. But I think, yeah, it would be good to get started. So, hey everyone, my name is Carmen, the founder of Another Startup Story. And yeah, I just want to say thank you for joining us wherever you are in the world. And I'm currently speaking from Singapore at the moment, and it's 7 p.m. But I appreciate you taking the time out to join. This is the second episode of the 6-part webinar series. And this session today will be hosted by myself and the founders of Malta Creative Collective, Rosella and Carla, who I'll introduce further on. Please, may I just ask you guys to mute your microphones and your videos before we start, and then we can kind of unmute that for the Q&A later on. But it'll be helpful if you could just make sure your microphones and videos are unmuted for now. So moving on to just give you a bit of a background about let me get the screen up. So Another Startup Story is a business coaching platform and consultancy. So we started off by really looking at the, I guess, leveraging on the fundamentals of, the power of storytelling, and how I was personally quite interested in understanding how a lot of founders and creatives and people who kind of went down the unconventional route as opposed to being in the 9-to-5, and understanding what the common thread was and why they chose these paths. And I think it's become a really popular topic in a way, because obviously during lockdown we've experienced, for those who have never experienced that before, this new way of working remotely. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of redundancies made, and people are looking into how they can kind of sell their skills online. And so this is why we really wanted to put this topic out there and just start a conversation around it. And so what we do is we have a podcast where we cover a lot of topics around obviously entrepreneurship and creativity, but very much looking at personal branding and personal development, which is a very big, good contribution to starting your business, because we all know it's about mindset, and that shouldn't be undermined in a way. And then on top of that, we have, I am a business coach, so I help individuals one-on-one and work with individuals to help them get started. People who want help with, putting together a business roadmap, or even just helping with, personal branding. It really depends. It depends. There's a tailored approach for each client. And then obviously we do events, usually offline, but now we're trying to bring it all online. So it's good because we get people from all over the world come. And then, there's a lot of other digital products and free resources and guides on the website. So feel free to check it out. To give you a bit of a background, about myself, I actually come from a very finance background. So I qualified as a chartered accountant back in 2016. So after I qualified, I went to work for a top 10 accountancy firm, and then went down the big route, the corporate route. And then after that, I went to work for a advertising agency, a global ad agency, where I was working as the financial controller there. So essentially working as a business partner to the MDs across an agency in London and Amsterdam. And then they brought me over to Singapore. And what I learned here is that a lot of creatives, so people in the advertising industry, lacked the business acumen, or they didn't really know how to, even working in a company, they didn't understand how to set rates or how to put together proposals in the most, profit maximizing way. So I saw this kind of like gap in the market to kind of bridge the two, so the creative world and also the kind of business finance world. And that's kind of where things all started. And then I also work with businesses inside on a consultancy basis. Moving on, before we actually get started in today's session, I just wanted to highlight the upcoming other webinar episodes that we have. Next week, we've got one on sustainability. And then following, we've got brand strategy, going freelance, and business and wellness. All the webinars are held at the same time. So make sure you register, because we have a limited number of spaces available. But yeah, moving on. So I will introduce you to our really special guest speakers today. We have the founders of Malta Creative Collective, who were founded in January 2017. And essentially we connected because they're doing very similar things to what we're doing over in Malta. Sorry, I've just got a message from Natasha saying you can't hear any audio. Can you hear now? I think I've just re-admitted you in. Looks like there's two Natashas. You can hear, cool. All right, great. There's always technical difficulties with Zoom. Yeah, so as I was saying, Malta Creative Collective, they're doing very similar things to us. They host events and are very good at kind of bringing together a community of creatives and artists and interior designers. And I'm sure they'll be able to tell you a bit more, but they kind of had their own little hub in Malta. So very aligned in terms of interests, but also values. And so the ladies behind the brand are Carla and Rosella. And so Carla is very much, she specializes in prints and she has quite an experimental practice of like watercolors, photography and digital technology. And she graduated in fashion innovation and management in UCA Rochester and spent a year in Paris kind of building on textiles and fabrics, etc. And then I think, you know, she'll be able to tell you more, but after receiving an invitation to exhibit at London's Graduate Fashion Week, she went on to work for Marc Jacobs, and then obviously further developing her career in a lot of London-based companies. And then she set up her own label, so she's had a huge wealth of experience in starting her own company. She set her own label up and has a studio based in Malta with her company co-founded called Salt and Sea. And then we have Rosella, who I'm sure for those of you who listen to the podcast, we've actually featured her on the podcast quite recently. She, similar to me, kind of started out in a very corporate legal environment. So she used to be a legal advisor to Vivienne Westwood, which is really interesting actually. And then she is also the co-founder of a niche accessory brand called Sophia Capri. And now she is a consultant to very purpose-driven creative brands, whilst also writing and having her work published for companies like Design Anthology. And she's also the founder of One Blue Dot, which is all about providing strategic support to, you know, really amazing small-scale creatives. So lots and lots of like nuggets of wisdom to be shared today. So yeah, I think the way this is going to work this session is that we'll be talking we'll very much be talking through, you know, the different setups of essentially being a freelancer, but also an entrepreneur. And then what we'll do is we'll open it up to you guys to ask questions for the last 15 or 20 minutes or so. So I will stop talking for now and let the girls introduce themselves, and yeah, we'll get started.
Carla, do you want to kick off with the mini intro?
Yeah, so just to go back into MCC, just to give you a little more info about our collective here in Malta. We set up monthly networking events. So whether it's us inviting people to chat to the collective, similar to what we're doing today with Carmen, so bringing a professional in to teach us about something or just to talk to us about a project that they're working on. So we either do those sort of things on a monthly basis, or as we just invite future members to present their own projects to hopefully join our directory, or sometimes we just meet up for a very informal chat and drink, which we find is so essential to grow this network in Malta, to meet like-minded creatives and to just have that space to chat about ideas and to try and grow ideas together. Ross, do you want to maybe add something else
Yes.
to our MC?
Yes. Well, I think before we do that, I just wanted to thank Carmen for having both of us on this conversation. And
always a pleasure.
we've been, Carmen and I have been chatting since, well, it's been since the beginning of this year, if not maybe a little bit sooner. And we've always tried, sort of had a bit of a brainstorm and said, how can we connect, you know, these two little islands? Because obviously Carla and I are based in Malta and Carmen's out in Singapore. And as Carmen and I were talking, we realized just how similar in many ways the creative community is across the line, as very different as obviously Malta and Singapore are. But we realized there are a lot of common threads that bring the creative community specifically together. So we had had a bit of a thought of actually creating a physical meeting in Singapore and bringing over creatives from Malta, but then obviously pandemic had other plans for us all, and so we said let's try and bring this conversation online and facilitate even people that are not based in either Singapore or Malta to tune into this conversation. And so yeah, so just wanted to thank Carmen for having both Carla and I on this webinar. Exactly what Carla said earlier about the purpose of the Creative Collective. It's very much driving home the idea that with creatives working together, there is so much more that can be accomplished than competing against each other. And this is something which we've always very much championed from day one. And this movement has expanded over the last three years. We just recently launched, or relaunched rather, the Collective's website. And we have in fact partnered with Another Startup Story to provide members that are part of the directory with consultancy services offered by Carmen. So we thought it would be a perfect opportunity for us to launch that partnership this week, since we launched the website on Monday, and introduce what Carmen does to the creative community out here in Malta. Very briefly, the Collective is all about, obviously connected to Malta, but the values that we champion are rooted in excellence. So we always try and seek out creativity that has that is talent driven, and we always try to, as far as possible, promote, as I said, the collaborative synergy, and to be as inclusive and not an exclusive. It's not a club that we just sort of allow a couple of members in. It's the whole spirit is really to include the creatives that are part of the ecosystem out here in Malta. So that's a little bit about the Collective. I'm not going to ramble on about my own because Carmen's introduced both of us really well, so I'm not going to go into that. But should we just kick off then on the first question, which is what I will be sort of...
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So when we talked a little bit about this topic of freelancer versus entrepreneur, I personally thought it would be very interesting to explore for a few minutes the question that actually arises before you even take the decision of whether you should become a freelancer or an entrepreneur, or even become an employee of a more structured corporation. And my question, which, I mean, everyone's reading on the PDF, so I'm not going to repeat it word for word, but a lot of my clients that come to me before they launch, they come to me and say, well, there's so many other people that have the same skills that I do. You know, even if I were to launch a business in the creative scene, it would be pretty much a failure even before I start, because there's so many out there and the competition is so intense. So I throw it back to who comes to me with this question, and we try to unpick why they even think this way to begin with. It's obviously we're very individualistic in terms of when we are creatives, we create things often within our studios or in our design spaces. We don't, as creatives, we don't really often have the opportunity to connect with larger community if you work, for example, in a company. So lots of thinking goes on behind the scenes, and I can understand why. And the point is that it's very easy to feel very overwhelmed. We are bombarded constantly with information that comes out from social media, through obviously LinkedIn, like countless of podcasts, and all you're hearing are these success stories of creatives that are incredible, and you just think, well, why should I even start? Because at the end of the day, you know, I'm pretty much no one. And I'm sure that a lot of people have heard of this term, the imposter syndrome. And I feel, and I've discovered that a lot of the creatives that I speak to who approach me before they launch business, a common trait is that they adopt this attitude, which is essentially rooted in lack of self-confidence. A little bit about the imposter syndrome label that some may not have heard of it before. Essentially, what does it mean? It's the idea that you are successful, that you have succeeded only because you've been lucky. It's been sort of a one, you kind of found that one time that you've succeeded, and it's not because of your talent or your creative skills. It was a term that was coined back in the late 70s by two psychologists in the States. And initially it was targeted at successful women in business back in the States. And there was the term that then they coined for this phenomena, and then it was developed since then. And basically it's applied to everyone. I mean, it could be man, woman, whether you are in creative business or in a corporate sort of position of power. But there is a syndrome which is very much, I'd say, a huge stumbling block for creatives that are attempting to come out of their shell, so to speak. What are the patterns of sort of this imposter syndrome phenomena? It's perfectionism, like you're feeling that you haven't got all of, you know, if you don't tick every single box, you're not going to even attempt the task. If you fail once, you think that's it. Why am I even trying to become a photographer or fashion designer? I mean, I'm a failure. You might wish to apply for a job in a studio or in a design firm and look at the criteria they're looking for, and you may not be you may not hold the degree that they're looking for in that specific job, and so you don't even apply because you think, I don't have a degree in whatever, so I'm not even going to try. So that mindset of I'm not good enough and I don't have the skills, I feel a huge block. Carmen, do you want to just move on to the next slide?
Yeah.
Very briefly. So before you even jump into think about whether your talent is business worthy or not, I feel so important for individual creatives to step back a little bit and reflect on their own sense of self-worth. That is so important to have it as balanced as possible. Now, it's obviously a big topic, and we could spend 45 minutes just talking on how to cultivate a balanced sense of self-worth. But I feel there are two things which personally, for myself, especially when I was starting out, and I launched my own accessories brand after I left my job at Vivienne Westwood, were two things. The first was looking to others for inspiration versus looking to copy others. I feel this is a very big distinction that needs to be made, and often people think that they just, if they look at what another creative is doing and copy exactly, step by step, their, whether they're releasing a collection in a certain way or there are certain patterns, that they will be able to replicate that exact same success. And that is very much counterproductive, because when you are copying, you're just essentially always 2 steps behind. Whereas when you look to others for inspiration, you are accepting your uniqueness, but at the same time, you are looking to others for guidance, so to speak, but not guidance that is going to dictate the way that you run your creativity, whether it's a business or just on the side as a hobby. The second thing which I find to sort of cultivate this balanced sense of self-worth is to allow intuition to guide you. And I don't mean this in a sort of, I call it the wooey spiritual way, but I mean this in a very down-to-earth, grounded perspective, which is to listen to yourself. And yes, listen to others for guidance. So you can approach someone like the collective if you want to network with other creatives, or someone like Carmen if you're looking for a mentor. But at the same time, don't take everything that we say as the Bible, or, you know, something that absolutely, if what I say is you have to do ABC, it's going to be that recipe for success, because there isn't a formula for getting it all right, no matter what any of us can say to you. So allowing intuition to guide you and not fear. Carmen, do you want to just wrap up onto my next slide so that I can just hand over? Yes, so the point that I want to make before we launch into the technicalities of freelance versus entrepreneur is essentially to realize that when you create from the space of quiet self-confidence, which is grounded, so not an ego-based confidence, but a confidence that you have within yourself of your talents and your skills, you will realize that because no one will be able to copy you exactly, because creativity is essentially comes from within you. It's innate and it's unique to each one of us. So to always bear that in mind when you approach your work, whether it is just for yourself or whether it is for a business or for a company that you work for. So yes, that is what I thought would have been really interesting to raise as part of the conversation leading up to how to choose between freelancer and entrepreneur.
Going back to your last point, Ross, I'd say that when you enter a project or an idea with passion, it can never be a direct copy of someone else's, because you cannot copy or mimic someone else's passion. So it's just so important to have that passion before you enter anything that we're going to keep talking about throughout this series.
Agreed.
This
Definitely.
So yeah. Shall I move on to the next slide, or shall we discuss
that? Yeah, I
that
think we're ready to roll on the second question.
Okay, so the next question is acknowledging your unique creative gift. So what's next? Is this idea business worthy? The way I see it is, okay, you've had this creative light bulb moment, which is fantastic, but now you need to think about whether this is a viable business and how to go about that. So the way I like to start off is a brainstorming session. I don't think you need to start off with a super precise business plan on Excel. I think you can start off by something as simple as mapping out your idea with a pen and paper and just getting it all out there. So all your ideas, all the stages to get to this idea, just map it all out, have a look at it. And that should start guiding you as to whether this is a hobby, this is a passion project, this is a freelance business, or if this is a full-time entrepreneurial business plan. And within this, I would say scalability is super essential. Through my experience, when I started my resort wear brand, scalability was definitely, the scariest part of it. So I had this idea, I had these prints, I had this concept, but how am I going to produce enough of this for it to be a business? Can I produce enough to call it a business, or is it just a hobby that I'm running from a small studio in Malta? And until production was set, I couldn't really form the business plan. Production, whether it's for a physical project or something online, so a digital service, production varies, but it's really important to understand the stages of it. And I'm going to speak through experience again, that for me, production had different levels. So it started off as very small local production, and then they reached a level where I needed to scale it further. So it's looking outside of my small circle and scaling it further. And that sometimes takes months, even a couple of years to get sorted. So just really think about it. Don't put a great idea, creative idea out there before understanding how to make it grow further, because you might just waste it in a way, you know. You might be really passionate about something creative and not knowing the risks and the valuation of how to make it move further into a great business plan. So I'd say once that is sorted, it's time to research further. What's your market position? What sort of brand or business are you setting up? Is it lifestyle? Is it innovation-led? Is it fashion-led, e-commerce? Where do you fit in? And who are your competitors? So look at pricing, look at what people are doing out there. So bringing you back to Rosella's points, like you have to see what else is happening around you. You cannot just grow your business in your dark studio, hiding from the world, because you're not allowing ideas and inspiration and problem solving to enter your idea. Then you need to network, and it can be physical, so through events. Like in Malta, there are quite a few different networking opportunities which you can find online and meet up with people physically. Or nowadays, I guess online through Zoom is quite a good way to get in touch with other networks. So joining some webinars that interest you, etc. And discussing your idea. So get ready to be criticized and challenged, and be open-minded about how people react to what you're trying to put out there. I think that's a really difficult and scary stage, but it's a really important stage to know if this idea is going to take you from a freelancer to an entrepreneur. Personally, I used to be super sensitive at the beginning when people would be so direct with their criticism, but in the long run, I've learned so much, and continuously learning from people who are interested in my product or not interested, because sometimes that information is as important to your growth. You know, is this product totally useless? Where can it improve? So you have to be open to how other people will react to your idea. Once you gather all this research, I would say just have an honest evaluation with yourself. I think it's really helpful if you can find a mentor along the way who will be honest with you as well, and sit down and look at all these bits and pieces, and then help you form a more concrete business plan and really evaluate everything that you've been working on to help you move forward. And I would say that's how I would go about seeing if an idea is business worthy, and seeing where it will take you. It might lead you on to another business idea, for all you know.
Yeah, I like what you said there, Carla. I mean, just to underline, I think it's really important, after having done that initial brainstorming that you've outlined, to realize that you may sit back and say, you know what, actually, I just want to do this for fun. And that is absolutely fine too. I feel that sometimes there's a lot of pressure on creatives who have certain skills, who are approached by people who might have seen their work or have sort of come across their portfolio and say, oh, you should totally like open an online shop or create a brand. And so easy then to get sucked into this tunnel and this vortex of, okay, so maybe this is what I should be doing to make a living and to earn money. But not everyone has to do that. And I think it's really important to underline, which is why we broke this down into these steps, because you might reach that point after the initial evaluation where you think, yes, I have this amazing creative gift. I am balanced in my worth and I'm expressing it in my own unique way. But you know what? I'm just going to keep doing it as a hobby, and that is totally fine too. And I think that needs to be underlined as much as the successful entrepreneurial business freelancer stories that we hear all the time about, which I feel we don't probably hear as much of, the less sort of hobbyish style of doing creativity.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want to get these points down and sort of checked off your list before making an initial investment financially and time, because you don't want to go into something without really thinking about it and then get stuck and just see maybe okay, listen, I'm not going to be too negative, but maybe the waste in it. Because it's happened. I mean, I've had it with so many other ideas, and it's, yeah.
But that's totally fine too. I mean, having an idea and trying it out and it not coming out the way that you planned it as a creative is also, I know we say this all the time, it's a learning experience. You take something from it all the time. And of course, in the middle of it all, you're having a breakdown and thinking, why on earth did I just not go out and sell bananas on the beach? But, you know, it's every experience, every single experience in our life, whether it's professional or personal, gives us a huge amount of skills that we take with us throughout the next chapter or the next part of our journey. So it's yeah. But I think Carmen, I think we should move on to Carmen's part, because otherwise you and I, Carla, are going to ramble on for the next 28 hours.
No, it's super insightful, and I kind of wanted to add in parts, but I'm conscious of time. But I think both of you had a really good insight in really looking at the beginning stage of where I'm at, for those of you who, because I'm not sure what stage of the journey, those of you who've tuned in are at, but essentially, you may be thinking about dabbling into, getting out of full-time employment, but you may already be a freelancer looking to make the entrepreneurship leap kind of thing. There's like different stages. But what Carla mentioned was very much looking into, do I want to start a business, and whether this is actually a scalable business idea. Like you said, there's so many business ideas, and ideas come so easy these days, but it's about the execution at the end of the day, and whether it is, financially and mentally also. And is it something you are genuinely passionate about, or is it just because you want to make money? I think there is this kind of big rise in a lot of young people wanting to be entrepreneurs, like kind of isolating themselves, working alone remotely or in like co-working spaces. And there is a big kind of surge in, the nomadic culture as well, and more intertwined. But this means that we're more likely to essentially burn out if the measures aren't put in place, because you are essentially on your own. And I think it's important to raise these points before going into something, because it's not easy and it does get really lonely. And I guess, being an employee in like a really trusted kind of really high and free and supportive environment is kind of heavily underrated. So it's just about understanding what the key principles are for you as an individual, and I'll cover those in further on later. But I guess moving on to my points, I really wanted to talk about what kind of setup to choose and distinguish between the differences and similarities between these different setups. So essentially it's deciding about whether you wish to pursue this, go down that road of monetization based on your set of principles. With COVID happening and everything, there is this big kind of movement to work remotely. People are looking for more freelance work. People are selling their services online. There's just so much content and noise out there. And so I think it's easy to kind of like jump on the bandwagon and just continue to be like, yeah, I want to do the same. But actually, it's like stop, think carefully, what are the pros and cons before you take action, And so looking at really what the similarities are, like running your own business and building your personal brand, there are very clear, strong differences. And obviously with job security kind of no longer guaranteed, like I said, many are opting to start their own things and to be able to take control of their own futures. It'd be really interesting to see where this kind of goes and how this impact has like a big, what the macroeconomic impact is as well. So the first setup, of course, is, I guess, entrepreneurship. And what this means is really being able to scale. So the difference between, an entrepreneur and a freelancer is that an entrepreneur gets other people to do things for them. So essentially they are outsourcing a lot of things, whether that's, like a design agency, outsourcing the design work. So when I say outsourcing, they're employing other people to do it for them. Whereas if you were a freelancer, you would be physically delivering those services to your client yourself. Obviously, entrepreneurs are able to use this money to build bigger businesses themselves, because they essentially make a profit from hiring other people to do the work, and then obviously reinvesting the profit to grow the business further. That's generally why they're called entrepreneurs, but they generally end up being able to scale businesses. So further on down the line, maybe at the beginning they're kind of doing everything, but further on down the line, when the business is at a stage of growth, essentially they're managers, they're managing people. They're not really doing the work themselves. They're hiring a team of experts who are who are more qualified and more talented than themselves, to make this business a very well-oiled machine. And so essentially entrepreneurs make money out of their visions and their ideas. They're very big picture people. And so it's important to distinguish, like, being a freelancer and kind of, selling your services to clients is not being an entrepreneur. And looking at the pros and cons of each. So obviously the pros are very obvious in terms of having the freedom and chance to really grow your income exponentially. Like, whatever you put in is what you get. And a good example, which I could say, is obviously, with the business coaching sessions, like, I have different streams of income. Like, the business coaching is one, and also I provide B2B services, so consultancy work for companies. But essentially what I earn is unlimited, it's uncapped. So depending on the work that I put in, I can take control and full ownership of my income. Whereas before, when I was working for a company, obviously I got paid a fixed monthly salary. And, unfortunately that company didn't do bonuses either, so I couldn't really impact that in a way. So obviously the pro of and the entrepreneurial nature is that you can grow your income exponentially. There's no limits. And also there's lower corporation tax rates. Obviously this varies depending on where you're from, but generally speaking, tax rates are a lot more favorable to companies than working full time for someone else. And then I guess it's a lot less hands-on, as opposed to doing the fully consultancy work. So if you're a freelancer, which I'll come on to in a sec, you would be physically doing the work and getting into the nitty-gritty of things, etc. And then obviously the cons, which definitely should not be skimped over, is that it really requires like high discipline and like a lot of work, and it's continuous work. It's like having to wake up every morning and be like, I'm going to put in the work. No one's like telling you to come to work and show up. And what that requires is a lot of work in terms of mindset. And I think something that Rosella mentioned earlier on was how, it's really trusting your intuition, and knowing when, the ship is kind of staying the wrong way. And that it is lonely, because no one, to be quite brutally honest, no one is going to care about your business apart from yourself, until you start to bring on more a bigger team and hire people. But it does require high discipline to wake up every morning and to get going. There are also many, many other skills that you need to learn in terms of selling and marketing, because, any good entrepreneur you'll know is a good salesman or saleswoman. These I wouldn't say they're cons, but, essentially something to think about, are also required in a freelance setup too, and that's also undermined. So really thinking about how to set yourself up as a business, like even if you have a good product or good service, like how are you going to get yourself out there? Like you could be selling the best like chocolate hotcakes out there. Chocolate hotcakes, I'm not even sure if that exists, but whatever, it's the first thing that came to my mind. But you could be selling the most delicious chocolate hotcakes. But if your marketing is crap and you can't sell, then you're not going to sell them. It's not going to be a viable business. And then obviously looking at high investment, this really depends on the nature of your business. Generally speaking, service-based businesses are very, low investment and don't require as much as, a product or tech-based companies. And so it's really distinguishing what type of business you want to set up as. And yeah, I guess the last point is just reiterating on the point that it can be lonely, which is why it's so important to be plugged into these communities, and getting the right resources and not just relying on your family and friends for advice, because they won't really know what you're going through, and it's difficult. So moving on to the freelancing aspect. So as Seth Godin, if anyone who doesn't know Seth Godin, he's a marketing god, and he really talks about freelancing as someone who gets paid for their work and charges by the hour or perhaps by project. And so, you know, you're really working to kind of perform a piece of work or charging a fixed hourly, daily or monthly rate. This is like the easiest way to start a new business, and it's kind of like a good stepping stone to entrepreneurship. And a lot of freelancers kind of make money off of their skills and expertise in a way. And I'd say it's a good kind of, yeah, getting your toes wet in the water in a way and to try things out. And the beautiful thing is you can actually do this whilst you can be a freelancer and be building your, you know, kind of entrepreneurial empire in the background. You can be both at the same time. Now, the main pros and cons, obviously the pros are very similar to entrepreneurship, no 9 to 5, kind of freedom to work from home. Sometimes, you know, obviously some clients require FaceTime, freedom to kind of set your own days and take holiday when you want. But also that's, you know, dangerous because yes, you can take holiday when you want, but you know, when you know you could be earning money instead, there's an opportunity because of whether you should take holiday. Whereas obviously when you're employed, you get paid for holiday, that holiday time. So it's just something to think about. Also, being able to charge higher rates. Generally speaking, when I was working as the FC, the financial controller in the advertising agency, I was physically, you know, looking at the rates for a lot of creative freelancers coming into the agency, and you know, just to tell you that they were getting paid way more than what the full-time employees were getting paid, purely because, you know, essentially they have to provide their own equipment, their own laptops. There's no risk. The company's not paying pension, blah blah blah. So yeah, you can charge higher rates, and obviously if you set it up in a way that is like a limited company or the equivalent in your country, you do have lower corporation tax rates. And another con, another pro, sorry, is a chance to work on various projects to kind of expand your skills and experience in a short time, because there is a quick turnaround on different projects. This is sometimes not always the case because you may not be so lucky, depending on the clients that you work with. And then moving on to the cons, obviously, it is very hands-on with the project. It can be quite time-consuming. What I've experienced in the past when I was kind of freelancing is a lot of clients that I worked with kind of were paying me. I was charging them on a monthly basis for like say 3 days a week, but they were just calling me on the weekends and stuff and kind of treating me like a full-time employee. And there's a very fine line and a fine you've got to set boundaries, essentially, is what I'm saying, and it can get quite stressful when you're working for multiple kind of clients at a time. And then the second point really is just obviously the uncertainty and difficulty finding clients, especially in this period right now. So I would say, you know, not to take the leap unless you have like a, you know, a kind of clear lead generation or funnel or clients kind of, or 1 or 2 retainers like ready to kind of sign and work with you straight away, because it is difficult. Unfortunately, I'm going to paint the realistic picture right now, and there's a lot of content and people providing free services now. So, you know, how can you really stand out? So again, like brushing up on your sales skills in a way, and networking is so invaluable and it's not to be undermined. And then obviously having to pay for your own equipment, pension and insurance. Like when you set up your own thing, there's so many other things you just don't think about, like because your company used to do it for you. And then obviously having to sort out your own tax and accounting. So for those of you who are actually creatives and lack that business acumen, yeah, there's a lot of admin to do, I'm telling you. And it's like, even just putting together invoices, writing proposals, like there's a lot of work, and we can't undermine it. It's not just, we'll go ahead. It's reading through contracts. Not to put you off, but obviously the pros and the awards are great, but also it's good to understand the full picture before you jump into any kind of setup. And then, the last 2 points is really, it can kind of be lonely, and you can kind of still feel like you're working for someone else, especially during the long-term contracts when you're having to show FaceTime or having to kind of join weekly calls and whatever. So, I think it's just something to think about. Moving on to, I'm pretty sure most people have worked for companies at some point in their lives. and the pros and cons are pretty obvious and familiar to most people. But having the consistent income each month and being surrounded by a really good team who are inspiring and smart minds who are able to bounce ideas off is a good thing as well, and not to be forgotten about. But also the cons of being employed, as we all know, is like, yeah, it's a fixed salary. You can't really increase that. You obviously have fixed hours, the need for FaceTime, and also the limitations in choice of work projects and like job responsibilities that you are defined to that job description or the role that you signed up to, which can be really frustrating for a lot of people who are very creative and very multifaceted. And so, yeah, I just kind of want to finish off before we open up for Q&A on just a few set of principles that I think you should all take home with you today. Really looking at how much freedom you actually value and whether you're good working in a freedom environment, because not everyone is. Can you have the self-discipline to, utilize that freedom, of time? But also, secondly, are you working with smart, inspiring people? I think for me, I love the business coaching, the one-to-one side so much, and I'm kind of filling other people's cups and helping other people. But what I found was that I wasn't getting intellectually challenged and I wasn't getting fed. So that's why I started to work with companies as well. And, obviously I have other mentors, and I am plugged into an amazing community and people who I go to. But are you being surrounded by kind of people who are going to inspire you and keep picking you up when you want to give up? And then obviously looking at meaningful work, like what work you actually want to create, how this is going to, go beyond your ego and your kind of proud work, and how this is going to help the world in a way, especially at such a time of need right now. I think there'll be a massive resurgence of new companies being formed post-COVID, because, there's just so many problems in the world without going into detail right now. So yeah, looking at what work you're creating. And then the last 2 points, obviously, are you actually good at it? Are people going to pay for your services? And then finally, looking at work-life balance, like, I think, yeah, being an entrepreneur, or even as a freelancer, it does take up a lot of time. And are you a mum or a dad who wants to spend the next few years with your newborn baby or your kids who have just, are growing and spending time with them? And I think all these things need to be taken into account. And it's all about integrating your personal life and who you are as an individual with what you want to do professionally, because sooner or later the lines are going to be blurred and you're going to be faced with like a crossroads where you feel like you can't, it just gets really complicated and you can't cross. So yeah, I know that was a lot of information. I tried to cram in as much as possible in the short space of time. I know we did start at 7:05, so we have definitely got a lot of time to answer any questions. But yeah, I guess the last 2 slides really, and then I'm sure Rose and Carla will want to add their parts. But really, it's just about my experience working with a lot of coaching clients and agencies is that really you want to be juggling. A good idea is to kind of like juggle 3 projects. So they say like 1 to pay the bills. This could be a full-time job. 1 project that pays for the extras, and then 1 really exciting personal project where that's not paying anything right now in terms of financial value, but kind of has high impact in the future, and in the future is going to be massive. So yeah, it's really looking at your own setup and what suits for you. We can provide you and guide you on the way, but yeah, we're all about designing a setup to create the life that you want to live, which sets you up for the best freedom and the best kind of setup in a way. So yeah, just to conclude, it's really about understanding there's no one-size-fits-all template for this process, and you all need to reflect on your own questions, not to rush or jump into anything just because everyone else is doing it. So yeah, that's my kind of 2 cents on it. I'll let Rose and Carla add to anything, as I'm sure they'll want to. And we just want to open it up for Q&A for the next 15 minutes or so. So feel free to add any questions you have in the Zoom group chat, and we'll try and help as much as possible.
Carla, did you have anything that you wanted to highlight coming off of that?
I mean, to be honest, more highlights, I'd love to get your opinion on one of the things you've touched on within freelancing, and it's about time. So when you mentioned the time, like if you've got, you know, a lot of freelance projects on, a lot of clients, and making it clear that you're not working for them 24/7, how would you advise someone to approach this? Would you quote an hourly rate when you give that client an invoice and remind them of that rate when they're constantly getting in touch? Or would you advise a freelancer to go about it differently?
Do you want me to answer that question? Oh. Yeah, no, that's a really interesting question. I think I think that I personally always think charging a day rate is a lot more, or monthly. Monthly is a lot better, and having kind of set time, because nowadays people work so flexibly, and hourly kind of really is so granular that it becomes very kind of difficult to track. Do you know what I mean? What I usually do is, and I advise other people who are actually working for clients, is to actually time track. So do timesheets and actually show that, have that ready to show to the client if they demand that, you know, just so you have proof on where you're spending your time and whether you need to raise your rates. But I think it's that's what I mean by putting together proposals. You need to really be clear about how you're being billed, essentially. And I think day rates and monthly rates are a lot better than essentially hourly rates, because it just becomes too complicated. If you've already done that and you're already working on an hourly basis, it's really about being transparent when you're going over time to what was committed in the contract. Again, time batching and like making a note on your timesheets, and kind of presenting that to the client if you can. And then another point is to, if that doesn't work, then it is just about just opening the conversation up with a client, not from a defensive way, but kind of in a way that's just like, you know, at the moment I'm being stressed on other clients, etc. And I just think communication is always the way forward. And if you communicate clearly, you know, then the client is rational. He or she has to understand. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's actually amazing. Thanks. Definitely answered it.
Sure.
I just wanted to touch very briefly on something you said earlier, Carmen, about the importance. You mentioned it in the sphere of freelancing and realizing that you have a lot of paperwork and accounting and legal related points, which are huge. And often one thing that I have found is that when clients have approached me to collaborate, they seem to underestimate or don't really have much knowledge of how to go about, for example, registering a trademark or filing their tax returns. And because obviously as creatives, this is like the complete opposite to what we do. I mean, creativity is spontaneous. It's the complete opposite of a very structured and rigorous system. But for myself personally, when I was working at Vivian Westwood, I was within the legal team, and this sort of tug of war between the creative side and the more structured business side was evident on a very daily basis. And when we would speak to the designers back in the London office, who would send us designs that were basically they had taken a huge painting from a very famous watercolor of a famous artist from sort of the turn of the century, and they just printed it on a t-shirt. And they just said, yeah, we're just going to print this now. We're going to make 50,000 of these t-shirts. Is it okay? And we're just like, no, because you haven't designed it. Have you paid? Have you contacted the museum that has the rights? They were like, oh, we didn't know about that. And so my point is, whether it's a freelancer or whether it's an entrepreneur, not to underestimate the importance of less creative aspects of your business, and not to be afraid to sort of go out and speak to people that are obviously within the field that can support you and that can give you that advice, because we can't do it all. We definitely can't. You need to be able to reach out and to not be afraid to say, look, I don't really know much about this, but can you help? And to acknowledge that there is a huge part of business, whether it's freelancing or not, that is, it's balanced upon knowing certain very important things that are not creative, like intellectual property rights and accounting, for example.
Yeah, intellectual property rights sounds so complex, like I don't even want to go into that. But I think, yeah, like from my side, obviously I don't have a law background, so that really complicates me. And to give you an idea, I think I can't even remember what it was. I was looking at a contract and was just reviewed it for me. Obviously she has legal experience. So I found it so helpful, and it's so kind of her to kind of go through my contract just to check that everything sounded okay. But, you know, if it is, I mean, accountancy wise, if you were to set up as a freelancer or an entrepreneur, I always advise getting a qualified accountant. You know, that's kind of mandatory and standard anyway. But if it is about the other parts, definitely I advise outsourcing the parts that you're not good at, or yeah, getting a mentor or coach or someone who's done it before to talk you through it. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Rob. Does anyone have any more questions? It feels like everyone's really shy. Like in the last webinar last week, we had so many questions that people just kind of wouldn't stop. So yeah, please don't feel shy, and please ask any questions. No question is a silly one. But yeah, if not, then we'll just continue talking, I guess. And I don't know if you guys had any more input to add on the topic.
Not on my end. I mean, I think the last slide pretty much sums it up from my perspective. The realization that there isn't a rule for everyone, and there isn't a template for everyone on how to do things in the creative realm, which is the beauty of the creative sphere, that there isn't a one size fits all. So to be aware of that at every step of the way, when you are sort of evaluating which way to go in terms of business setup.
I think it's also really good that, I mean, thanks for outlining the entrepreneurial side, because I find that nowadays, I don't know, maybe there was like the word entrepreneur like resurfaced or something, and whenever someone has an idea, which is most of the time a freelance business, they consider themselves an entrepreneur. And there's such a difference between the two that we do, I think, use the word nowadays, and an entrepreneur doesn't mean that it's your idea and you working physically in it every day, but it's your idea that you're kind of offloading onto others, or putting others within it. And I think it's quite important to distinguish the two. Like people,
and it's okay to be both at the same time, right? I think it's really looking into, the thing I attach of, you know, an entrepreneurial setup is very much, the scalability. So how can you get things done at a cheaper cost in a way to increase your margins? How are you going to grow the business? A business needs more profits to be, you know, regenerated and pumped back into the business to grow in a sense. So do continue, Carla.
No, and I think a lot of the time a creative individual who does have a creative product to launch often needs to team up with an entrepreneur who is more focused on answering the questions and helping solve the problems for scalability. And that's okay, you know, it's great to team up with the right person to make your idea happen. I don't think you, as a creative, need to feel that you have to start it all by yourself for it to feel like it belongs to you. I think if you find someone who you can share that with, a blessing, and it's amazing because it gives you more creative freedom as a creative individual. I mean, for me personally, when I started off the business, I had a partner who helped with all of that, and it was amazing because there's no way I could have learned everything on my own and understood like all the legal steps as well to get that done. Like it's impossible to just try to do it all by yourself because you want it to be yours, you know.
Of course. No, it's totally understandable. And most people who are featured in like PR and press, obviously they're the face of the company, but you don't realize how many people are helping them, you know, behind the scenes, and often that's really underlooked. So another tip is not to trust press and media, because having worked in, I haven't worked in the industry, but obviously worked in businesses which do require a lot of press. It's often not so, accurate in a way, and there is a lot of kind of bending the truth and stuff. But yeah, I think I'm going to have to wrap up now, just because, I'm conscious of time, and it doesn't look like we have any more questions. But yeah, if you guys want to stay in touch, then here are our handles. I'll make sure that we share the deck post call. I'll make sure that, we'll send it to you by email. So feel free to, great if you've made notes. It's a really good way to kind of make sure everything is kind of sinking into your brain. But if you haven't, then don't worry, I'll be sending them the deck after. But I just wanted to say, thank you so much to the girls from Malta Creative Collective for joining. They've just been, really lovely to kind of, and not really work and like, collaborate with in a way. We've collaborated on a number of different things, but yeah, they're really insightful, and feel free to check out their website. They've recently just done a big relaunch and looks super cool. And there's lots of useful information on there, so definitely check it out. But yeah, thanks so much for joining, everyone. And if you can connect with us drop us a DM on Instagram, we'd love to hear where you're from. If we can help you in any other way, if you come up with other questions, we don't bite, we're super friendly. So and one last thing is obviously to so make sure you sign up to our other upcoming webinars, we look forward to hearing from you soon. It looks like someone else has just joined. Maybe she's got the time wrong. Oh dear. The time zone might have yeah, Alyssa, I think. Sorry, you've just joined and we've just finished.
But we'll have a recording.
We have a recording and it'll be on your platform, right?
Yes, we're going to upload it on the YouTube channel. We'll put a post up on Facebook and on social media, so that whoever sort of comes onto our social media handles, they'll be able to access the link to this recording, no problem.
Cool. Yeah, sorry, Alyssa. I think, you've just joined, we've just finished, but we'll put the recording up and I'll send you the deck. I'm sending everyone the deck after by email. But thanks so much for joining. Hopefully you found this useful or inspiring in some way or form, and hope to see you soon. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much to everyone who joined.
Thanks. Bye.